We are live.
Woohoo!
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Intro to
Hello,
Web
good morning.
Accessibility. How's everyone doing today?
Great.
Good. All right. Well, for those at home, my name is Ashley Mansell, and I work at North County Regional Library in Huntersville, part of the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Library System. I'm also a member of the Library Code Lab team, and I'm here today with LaSharia Fullwood, who is helping facilitate the program with me. You want to introduce
Good
yourself?
morning, everybody. My name is LaShara Fullwood. Everybody calls me La. I am at the South County Regional Library as part of the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Library System, and I am also a team member with fabulous Ashley you have here on Library Code Lab team. So welcome, everybody, and welcome our friends who are here today. We're glad to have them here.
Right. Before we get started, I'd like to take a moment to tell you about Library Code Lab and our partnership with QC Bytes, also known as Queen City Bytes. Library Code Lab is an informal learning series based on the concept of accessibility, collaboration, and fun. Our team offers classes where we focus on different coding language or concept and work hands-on projects to learn as a group. We also partner with local tech organizations for programs such as today's program, where you gain knowledge from experts in the field. Since we began our partnership with Queen City Bytes in May 2019, we have collaborated on delivering workshops and program series on a variety of tech topics. These have covered introductory information, deep dive practices, and career insights. We are excited to continue this partnership and bring you our programs live online. Now, here are our speakers. This is Louise Clark, application developer consultant with Gray Shore Associates, and Alyssa Lemon, a web developer at Ray Ward. Thanks, everyone, and I'm now going to turn it over to our presenters.
All right. Well, thank you so much for having us. Alyssa and I are very excited to welcome you to this introduction to web accessibility. I am going to, oh yes, Eric, thank you so much. Will you switch us into the next slide? Okay. I did want to introduce us to the mission of QC Bytes. This is our group, Queen City Bytes. And I promise we will not be reading out slides, but I want to read out our mission. And the mission of Queen City Bytes is to support underserved or marginalized communities in finding access to technology careers through offering technical instruction, educational resources, and an environment where networking and mentorship are valued.
And during normal times, we have a lot of in-person activities. Thankfully, during this, we've been allowed to continue our workshops. So thanks for joining us for this. Once things are a little bit back to normal, we'll have Coffee and Codes, which is a once a month meetup on a Saturday or Sunday. And we have a guest speaker come and talk about different tech topics. And then there's an hour Q&A afterwards, and it's very casual. And then Bites and Brews, which is more of our networking side of things, where we'll go out once a month and just mingle and meet other people in the industry. And so we look forward to you joining us for those in the future.
And we are very excited to have this relationship with Library Code Lab. We've done a lot of events over the past year and a half, and we are definitely continuing that relationship, and we will be offering more workshops in the future. And we'll talk about some of those coming up at the end.
And if anybody has suggestions of things they'd like to see us do as a workshop, please definitely let us know.
Oh, good call, yeah. Okay, yeah, so I am an application developer. I am also a certified professional accessibility awareness consultant. No. Yeah, I just totally messed up my own title. Certified Professional Accessibility Awareness Certification is what that stands for. And basically it means that I am an accessibility advocate. I am an application developer. I do, work on my team developing React, TypeScript, but I'm an accessibility advocate for my team as well. And that means helping my team out with accessibility audits for our products. It means working with our design team as we are developing a design system that incorporates accessibility for our, different components and our different processes. So there's a lot about my job as an application developer that involves accessibility. And yeah, my former background is as a teacher, Latin American history, and I am also a mom with 3 children. So that always makes life very interesting when you're intersecting work and learning and child raising. So. Go ahead. Yeah.
And my name is Alyssa Lemon. I am a developer at Ray Ward. I do mostly web work. We work in the LAMP stack on the back end and the usual front end languages and bases on the front. I'm accessibility focused, and I'm certainly an aspiring CPAAC like Louise, hoping to take some classes and get certified in the near future. My background is in anthropology, and I have had a lot of experience with CAD/CAM, which is programming for industrial type applications, and that is what led me into development. So I've been a developer for 2 years now professionally, but I got into accessibility even before that, thanks to Louise.
All right, yes. Why did we get interested in Ally? We'll explain Ally in just a second. All right, yes. Actually, Alyssa, I'll let you speak to this one.
Yeah, so in our former group that we were in, Louise had organized an accessibility seminar. DeCue University is an organization that is focused on accessibility of all kinds in technology and the web. And it was a 4-hour course that we all got to go to. At the time, I was a member of this group, and Louise was one of the leaders. And in that 4 hours, we learned about different technologies that assist people in accessing the web, different physical items that help people use computers. It was absolutely fascinating. So that sort of piqued my interest from the very get-go.
And I also had that same experience. I found an interest in accessibility by doing some research with a UX lead on the incorporation of accessibility in design systems. And so I, through DeCue, found out about CSUN. And CSUN is an annual meeting, a conference that happens. And I was able to go to the conference and experience this 3 or 4 days, I think, of just being in this community of people that were so passionate about making the web and digital experiences accessible for all. And I realized I had found my home, advocating for this type of social equality within the digital space. And okay. Sorry, I am reading. Yeah, let's save, and Eric, let's save comments for just the end. Yep. Thank you. Okay, so accessibility, what is the difference? I just wanted to introduce you to these 2 terms because they're kind of thrown around a lot. Accessibility, usability, universal design, and inclusion. Okay, so accessibility specifically takes into account the needs of people with disabilities. Usability is really about designing products that are effective, really efficient, really satisfying for everyone, and that also doesn't disproportionately impact people with disabilities. So user experience designers and researchers can incorporate accessibility concerns to make their designs work better for people in a lot of different situations. Universal design, this is kind of an even broader concept. The Center of Universal Design at North Carolina State University defines it as the design of products and environments to be usable by all people to the greatest extent possible without the need for adaptation or specialized design. And then, of course, inclusion is about, and we've heard this term bantered about a lot recently, right? But what does it mean? It's about diversity and ensuring the involvement of everyone to the greatest extent possible. So, you know, in the digital space, like we still want to take into account when we're building our products, you know, internet access and speed. We want to take into account economic situations, geographic locations, people's culture, their age groups, different educational levels, what languages they speak, and of course, disabilities.
So in the accessibility space, you'll see the term ally or A11Y come up in conversation. It is abbreviated that way because the letters in between the A and the Y are 11 letters, and it just nicely works out to be ally.
So accessibility. Okay, I am reading one more, but I will because it is important. Web accessibility means that websites, digital applications, tools, and technologies are designed and developed so that people with disabilities can use them. And so, you know, as designers, developers, product owners, content writers, right? We have to really ask ourselves if our paths to creation and our workflows are actually creating a better product. So, you know, different examples of this. Can a person use all of the different interactive elements on a web page? Can a person actually see the interactive elements on a web page? Can they read the text on a web page? So is, you know, your font contrast dark enough for people perhaps with low vision or color blindness to see your text? Can a person with a screen reader know what the images on a page mean? Can a person who maybe can't use a mouse only, you know, can they interact with your product only by using a keyboard? I also want to mention that I think that it's a real problem that technology training programs don't have accessibility practices baked throughout and from the beginning of their programming. I did a boot camp, and it really wasn't mentioned as something I should keep in mind as I'm programming. So we'll kind of touch base on some really high level topics about, you know, how you develop for, you know, accessibility. But I just want to call that out, and that could be a whole workshop in and of itself, is how can computer science programs, how can these boot camps incorporate accessibility training and best practices from the beginning?
Right. I would definitely like to echo that too, because I did also take a boot camp, and the only place I learned about accessibility was in Louise's specific seminar that she put on. Otherwise, I wouldn't really know much about it at all. And I think also people going into the workplace without that training creates an environment where it's not part of their best practices, which is something that we can get to a little bit later in the presentation.
Ooh, one of my favorite quotes from Tim Berners-Lee. So, and you know, this is from the inception of the web, right? That accessibility has been recognized as a really key aspect. So Tim Berners-Lee says, "The power of the web is in its universality. Access by everyone, regardless of disability, is an essential aspect." And that is what we were talking about today.
So official disabilities that would affect someone's ability to use the web are vast. including visual disabilities, which could include anything like blindness or legal blindness. And as Louise mentioned earlier, low vision or color blindness, hearing. The web increasingly consists of video and multimedia content like we are looking at right now. So if someone was watching this presentation, would they be able to hear? What else are we offering them that would provide them the ability to understand what content we are providing? So providing captions and transcripts. Sure.
Hold on just 1 second. I was going to say that you mentioned that if you are watching this and need captions, we should have mentioned this at the beginning. This is YouTube, so you should be able to turn your captioning on for our presentation.
Right. Yeah. Sorry about that. Yeah, I was like right in there. Yes, that is actually a really great feature of YouTube. It's pretty wonderful that they provide that. I know that Microsoft Teams also does that, and several other platforms are trying to adopt the ability to have live captioning on, which is excellent. Motor disabilities, such as the inability to use a mouse or slow response time or limited fine motor control, can really limit your ability to type or to use a mouse correctly without touching the buttons. So if you have no ability to use a mouse, there's keyboard navigation, and oftentimes websites are not very easy to control with just the keyboard as they jump around the entire page instead of in a nice, consistent order. And then there are cognitive disabilities. There are functional versus clinical cognitive disabilities. Clinical would be including autism, attention deficit disorder, traumatic brain injury, or Down syndrome. It's better for web developers to think about functional disabilities because it helps us determine possible solutions. And so functional disabilities would include memory, problem-solving skills, your ability to hold attention, reading, linguistic and verbal comprehension, mathematical comprehension. And actually, there are some examples in this slide right here. So, Eric, if you wanted to,
if you'll go back, just go back. Yeah. If you don't mind opening the visual link, there are a few quick videos that we wanted to show. Yeah.
And we'll be sending this presentation out to people after, so you can access all of the resources that are in all of the slides.
Absolutely. We may be having some audio issues.
But we've got captioning, so.
We've got captioning. So I'll read it out. But hold on just 1 second. Eric, is there a way to get the sound going? If not, we can start it over and I'll read out the captions. Worries. You know what? Okay. So let me just tell you, we don't have to watch all of these various videos, but I do highly encourage you. This is the w3.org site. This is of course the first resource that you can go to learn about accessibility in the web. And they have these perspective videos that I highly encourage you to watch if you are interested in accessibility. And we're going to talk about this a little bit more when we get to inclusive design. But I think the important thing to understand about disability is that it is something that we can all join at any moment, that it is temporal. It can be permanent, it can be temporal. So, if you break your arm, you may not be able to use your mouse. My eyes are increasingly getting bad, so I have glasses, but it could end up that I have a low vision disability at some point, so I would need different accommodations in the web to make it, my ability to access the web equitable. So I highly encourage you watching the Perspectives video. Also, just to make the point that a lot of times accessibility, especially from the technical perspective, so for developers and designers and product managers, and especially your stakeholders, it becomes a checklist, right? Checklist of items to, meet compliance. And it becomes less about people. And that is what accessibility is about. It's about people having equal access to all of the things that are so important in the internet right now, and in the digital space. So these videos help you understand the people that we are trying to problem solve for. Okay, the power of 504. So before we actually watch this very first little bit, I wanted to put my little history teacher hat on for you and give you a little bit of a timeline that leads up to 504. And I want to thank Claire Wells Johnson for some really great research that I have relied on for this. So before we get to 504, we actually do have a timeline of people with disabilities advocating for equal access for themselves, going all the way back to 1776. So I guess after the American Revolution, people who had injuries were given support for their participation in the Revolutionary War. I think that's really interesting. I just did a whole bunch of Revolutionary War research with my fourth grader. Thank you, remote learning. And I found that actually very interesting. So 1776, then you fast forward, and we have the founding in 1886 of Gallaudet University, which was the first university in the world for people with disabilities, particularly the deaf. 1935, we have the League of the Physically Handicapped, which was founded to protest discrimination by the Works Progress Administration. So apparently, job applications at that time were stamped with PH, which meant physically handicapped. And that was basically a mechanism to prevent people with disabilities from getting jobs, which is always an issue, the issue of finding good, secure employment. And the league actually held a 9-day sit-in against this practice of stamping job applications with PH. I'm going to fast forward, 1965, we have the Voting Rights Act. In addition to, of course, as we know, enforcing the voting rights of minorities, it also gave disabled people the opportunity to bring an able-bodied reader so that they could read out their inaccessible ballot. 1972, we have the Mills versus Board of Education case in DC, and that guaranteed that every child, regardless of the severity of their disability, could access a free public education. And so now this leads us up to President Nixon, who vetoed the Rehabilitation Act, and that led to an 80-person sit-in on Madison Avenue, stopping traffic. But fear not, it was passed the next year. This was really the first federal civil rights protection in the United States for people with disabilities. And it basically gave them more opportunities for independent living, self-determination. It prohibited discrimination based on disability on any federal level. And so that is kind of a quick timeline. And really, I just encourage you, if this strikes your fancy and you are interested in this, there is quite a bit of historical information that leads us up to the issues that we are confronting present day. So 1974, we have Section 504 amendment proposed. And let's see if the sound works on this. I just wanted to play the very beginning of this because it reads out the 504 amendment. Well, that's okay. I think I can actually read you the 504 as it goes through. No otherwise qualified handicapped individual in the United States shall solely on the basis of his handicap be excluded from the participation in, be denied the benefits of, or be subjected to discrimination under any program or activity receiving federal financial assistance, Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. Basically, Section 504, disability advocates knew that there had really been insufficient progress in assisting people with disabilities. They faced a lot of discrimination. And so activists organized a sit-in in San Francisco office of the Department of Health, Education and Welfare, and 150 people of who had varying disabilities led the longest sit-in in a federal building. It was a huge act of resistance, lasted for 28 days. And, what they were protesting really was that, people with disabilities were isolated and really relegated to, it sounds like an academic term, the private sphere, but basically their homes, boarding schools, institutions, suffered major depression because they were isolated from the world. And so Section 504 amendment really was created to recognize independent living as a quality of life issue. And then this leads us into, and you can see, I did have various resources available for you to do more reading about Section 504. And Alyssa, you might want to talk about Crip Camp.
Yes. So Crip Camp, A Disability Revolution, is an amazing film that was executive produced by Barack and Michelle Obama. It came out last year. It is documenting Camp Jened, which was a summer camp for people with disabilities run by hippies. And it basically gave them a chance to live a normal summer and not have to feel like they were being ostracized. A lot of them, went through challenges. People during the era were being put into institutions instead of being allowed to just be free and enjoy their lives. So Camp Jened was for people to just come and enjoy just living and not have to think about their disabilities as something to look down on. So we have we do have a film trailer for you, but if the sound's not working, I would encourage you all not only just to watch the trailer on the next slide, but to check out the film itself. It is available for free on Netflix, so definitely check it out.
Wait, you want me to tell them what happened? Well, two camps and this planning group were all very hyper about it. And I have to go shower some people. I'll see you later.
I wanted to be part of the world, but I didn't see anyone like me in it. I hear about a summer camp for the handicapped run by hippies. Somebody said you probably won't smoke dope with the counselors, and I'm like, sign me up.
Up to Camp Jened and find yourself.
There I was in Woodstock.
You wouldn't be picked to be on the team back home, but at Jened, you had to go up the back.
Even when we were that young, we helped empower each other. It was allowing us to recognize that the status quo is not what it needed to be.
The world always wants us dead. We live with that reality.
At the time, kids just like me were being sent to institutions. It was just a continual struggle.
Most disabled people, like myself, are unable to use public transportation.
We needed a civil rights law of our own.
A rehabilitation program has been vetoed by the president because it was cost prohibitive.
We decided we were going to have a demonstration.
You get the call to action, to the barricades.
A small army of the handicapped have occupied this building for the past 11 days.
So many people from Camp Jeanette found their way into the building.
The FBI cut off the phones. The deaf people went, we know what to do. That's how we communicated to the people outside the building. The Black Panther Party would bring a hot meal. We were like this.
We are the strongest political force in this country.
We will no longer allow the government to oppress disabled individuals. And I would appreciate it if you would stop shaking your head in agreement when I don't think you understand what we are talking about.
What we saw at that camp was that our lives could be better.
If you don't demand what you believe in for yourself, you're not going to get it.
We like to see handicapped people depicted as people. Excuse me?
Yeah, so we highly encourage you to watch that. Again, just remembering that accessibility is about people. In the next slide, we have a list of, so after Crip Camp came out, they did a whole summer in 2020 of Crip Camp sessions. And it was an amazing series of events. And these are just a few. I did contact Crip Camp to make sure I could share these with you. And they said, absolutely. So these are 3 of, I think, 15 maybe sessions that they had last summer that were various panels. But these were ones that I thought were really, I just wanted to be able to share with you. So internationalized ableism and intersecting identities, disability, race, class, and gender. We have always resisted the history of disabled Black activism and the ADA celebration. And actually the ADA, so just to wrap up our little historical timeline, in 1988, the first draft of the Americans with Disabilities Act started going through Congress. And it, of course, like anything, was a struggle to get passed. It did get passed in 1990, but it didn't get passed until after the Capitol crawl, which is where we had 1,000 protesters go to Washington, and 60 people who were either wheelchair bound or used a cane or a crutch or used crutches left behind these instruments that assisted them and dragged themselves up the 83 steps to the Capitol building. Basically saying, the issue is you. The issue is not us, right? It's this social model idea of disability. But it does lead us to the passage of the Americans with Disabilities Act, which basically took the federal protections established in Section 504 to the state and local level. So we'll go to them.
So this next slide is a quote by Marcy Sutton, who is a pretty big name in accessibility now. She is a web developer and independent consultant, and she has excellent resources too. I can add her website to the chat so that everyone can check out her site. She has a lot of writing and tutorials. Just an excellent person to follow if you're interested in accessibility.
Yeah, and so we want to use our skills as technologists to protect the equal rights of users. And she advocates for this idea, especially within the developer community, of writing JavaScript, keeping in mind civil rights of people, right? Like, so if you are coding without accessibility in mind, then you are excluding. If you are writing JavaScript and other kind of interactions that people can't access because of the way you coded it. So And yes, did you know people with disabilities are one of the largest groups of minorities on the web? And it is also one of the only minority groups that any of us can join at any time.
Which is a pretty powerful thing to think about. So the U.S. has several accessibility laws in place. The first one is the ADA, or the Americans with Disabilities Act, that we mentioned before. This is a civil rights law that prohibits discrimination against people with disabilities in areas where public accommodation services are offered, such as employment, transportation, architecture, education, and others. So this doesn't just cover the web. This is for every public domain. And then there's also Section 508, which is a little more specific. It deals with the government more so, and it requires the federal government to account for accessibility when acquiring technology that applies to the federal government and any other entity that it procures or conducts business with the federal government. So in 2018 alone, a total of 2,285 lawsuits were filed against American organizations on the basis of their content not being inclusive of people with disabilities.
And that leads us into the next slide. If you are interested in this topic of lawsuits and the purpose of lawsuits, as we all know, corporations are not people, and or at least I hope we know that. And it's very difficult to make a corporation understand the human needs of people trying to access various products. And so a lot of times, in order to force the hands to make their products more equitable, we have to use legal means. And lawsuits are certainly part of that. Lainey Feingold is a lawyer who I highly recommend following. She has a website, and she does so much advocacy work for accessibility rights or disability rights activism. She has written this book called Structured Negotiation, talking about, the ways to avoid lawsuits. Basically the concept of, hey, large international corporation, why don't you work with us to make your site more accessible? That way you can avoid a lawsuit. And, and that's a much more, you would think it's a more sane approach. It is a more sane approach. It's just why companies don't do it necessarily, I don't know. This video, which we are not going to watch, but is included so that you can watch it later, is about digital accessibility ethics. And I think it's really important. These were points that Lainey made in her presentation here, that accessibility is a part of all of these things in the digital space: privacy and security, diversity, equity, belonging and inclusion, transparency, global compliance, AI fairness, and there are other things. And I wanted to talk just very briefly, recently I did a bunch of research for my company, the company that we are helping, Prometric. Prometric does remote proctoring as one of their products. And so I did some research on artificial intelligence and how it's used in the remote proctoring space to track people who are cheating in online when they're taking exams online. And a lot of companies are using AI to flag fraudulent movements. Well, the problem with this in the accessibility realm is that, and honestly, this is a great example of accessibility, issues merging with usability issues, because people who take tests, if you have a disability, maybe your eyes are shifting around, maybe you have, uncontrollable motor movements, and those get flagged in an artificial intelligence algorithm as being fraudulent. And then you are flagged as being a cheater until proven otherwise. And this is incredibly problematic and causing a lot of lawsuits. Even my daughter, who takes these online exams, has issues because she can't help her eyes looking over to the side. We all have strange movements that we do when we're under stress, and this AI can flag that as fraudulent. So it's certainly, if that's the case for people who don't have any declared motor issues, it's certainly the case for those with disabilities, motor disabilities. And so there's a lot of conversation and starting to ramp up to be a lot of legal actions taken by students and others against these remote proctoring companies who are using this kind of AI. Okay, so inclusive design. We mentioned this previously. Designing inclusively doesn't mean you're making one thing for all people. You're designing a diversity of ways for everyone to participate in an experience with a sense of belonging. And, basically, users are affected by the interfaces we create. Alyssa.
Yes. So I was just going to say, I think Louise at the bottom there on the source, when you guys get the slides, includes Microsoft's Inclusive Design Kit. And for those of you who don't know, Microsoft is very heavily into trying to be all inclusive. They have a yearly summit called the Microsoft Ability Summit that anyone is welcome to attend. I think it just happened a couple weeks ago, so keep an eye out for it next week. But they have even shown their devotion to inclusivity by making products such as the Xbox controller. It's an adaptive controller, so as an inclusive design, it accounts for many different types of disability all in one. So it's not just for all people, but it's to be used in different ways. So we have an intro video to that particular product that is absolutely wonderful. We're going to take a look at it. Yeah, there we go.
Love. However, for gamers with limited mobility or gamers who don't use both their hands, this controller design might not work best for them.
Push you out of the way. I'm sorry. Doorknobs are the worst thing ever invented. Putting on shoes, the cell phones that I use, these are the sorts of things that we don't think about until we have to. And I think about them every day.
Yeah! I have cerebral palsy on my entire right side. This side of the controller is fine. This side doesn't happen. As game platforms have gotten more sophisticated, the controllers have gotten more sophisticated, and it started to get really frustrating.
We designed the Xbox Adaptive Controller through feedback from the accessibility community.
The Xbox Adaptive Controller is really easy. You just plug it in, and then you can plug in various other devices. I can make it work for me the way it has to.
With the Xbox Adaptive Controller, a gamer can game with one hand and one foot, or one hand and their shoulder, or even one foot and their chin.
And I can change it from game to game.
Good. Ready? Forward. Squeeze tall. There it is. Craig Hospital is a facility for patients who've either had a spinal cord injury or a traumatic brain injury, and it's a place for their rehab.
Yes. We're here for game night, and we're helping new patients getting back into gaming again. Is that the D-pad?
Yeah. Okay. Our role as occupational therapists is to get people back to doing. When the Xbox Adaptive Controller came along, it acted like an Xbox controller and it just worked.
Uh-oh. Over there.
Ooh. On the standard Xbox controller, it's just hard to press the buttons because can't really put pressure through my hands. But then with the adaptive controller, I can use like larger joysticks, larger buttons that are easier to press and reach.
Corey and his brother Zachary are twins. Before Corey's injury, Zachary had gamed with him regularly, and that was a way that they related to each other as siblings.
Who do you love playing Xbox with here at Craig Hospital?
Zach.
The Xbox Adaptive Controller and the Copilot feature allowed them again to play games together. So there's a huge social component to it.
You got that. Yes, yes. They can play any game that they want. I see the confidence just burst out of them.
Microsoft is amazing in the accessibility sphere right now. Their CEO, his son, I believe, has cerebral palsy, and he has made it a centerpiece of Microsoft's mission to make, to acknowledge the issues faced by people with disabilities and to work on making products that are accessible. And that was a great video. I'm so glad you included that, Alyssa.
Yeah, that's pretty great.
So the next couple of pictures are just taken from the Microsoft's Inclusive Design Kit. And it's just basically showing you that disability is there's a range of disabilities. So, you know, we have permanent, of course. So in this, we're looking at someone who may be blind from birth. But then there's temporary. So maybe you're recovering from eye surgery. And then situational. And I know I've dealt with this, dealing with screen glare from the sun, right? So there's different experiences of blindness. The next slide, we're looking at a spectrum of physical disability experiences. So maybe permanent would be that you have one arm. Temporary would be that you have an arm injury. And then, of course, situational. I mean, as a new parent, I was always holding a baby in one arm. And, you know, that also affects your ability to, you know, interact with, you know, use your computer and interact with digital products. So I really encourage you to look at Microsoft's Inclusive Design Kit. Okay. Shift to the left. Shift to the left is a it's a topic. It's a topic in technology teams where we are talking about moving accessibility considerations to the very beginning of the product experience. So ideally, we want to move from a post-design accessibility checklist model where developers are checking things and realizing things aren't accessible and then having to go back and refactor. And that is a very expensive approach. You build a product and release it and then realize it's broken from the beginning. You want to create products that are conceived from the beginning with accessibility in mind. Very much like thinking about security, right? You know, it's a lot easier to think about security from the beginning than it is to include it after you've already launched your product. So this is just an image. It's from Deque, and I think that source will link you to an article that is in Deque's blog that talks about the concept of shift to the left for development teams.
I also wanted to add, as someone with experience in having to retrofit websites for accessibility, that it's expensive because it is very time consuming to try and go back in and change the code all the way around so that it's accessible. It takes a lot of testing. It takes a lot of trial and error, especially if you're trying to deal with design features that aren't necessarily accessible, but that the company wants to keep anyway. So yeah, it's definitely better to shift left. There are a number of assistive technologies that people can use that will help them better use the web, such as screen readers, which are software products used by blind or visually impaired people to read the content of the computer screen. Basically, it reads it out to you in a voice as you go over the text. There's screen magnification software, which allows users to control the size of text or the size of graphics on the screen. Speech input software provides people that have difficulty typing an alternative way to type text and also control their computer. Motion tracking or eye tracking, which is somewhat related to what Louise was talking about earlier, but it can include devices that watch a target or even the eyes of the user to interpret where the user wants to place the mouse pointer and moves it for the user, for people with mobility issues. Head pointers is a stick or an object mounted directly on a user's head that can be used to push keys on the keyboard. It is used by individuals who have no use of their hands.
And this is a 1-hour video of a employee at DeQ, and I forget his name, and I really apologize. But he goes through the process of demoing how he uses a screen reader. And again, I highly encourage anyone who is building products to really get very intimately acquainted with how people are interacting with your product, so that you can really instantly hear or see the issues that people are confronting when using your product. And so there are a variety of resources also linked here about testing with screen readers, designing for screen reader compatibility. I know right now my product that I'm working on got an accessibility audit, which is something that a lot of companies will do to make sure that they are meeting compliance. And a lot of the refactoring work we are doing now is adding in code that is going to be helpful, ARIA, WAI ARIA code, that is going to be helpful to making the product more accessible for screen readers. So certainly encourage you to watch that video at a later point. Move us into, oh, and you know what? There is a series, I just want to highlight this in case we have anyone who is a developer or designer on right now. There is a company, I'm going to put this in chat if you don't mind sharing it, Eric, nobility.org. This organization runs fantastic trainings that are usually not very expensive. And I think they do have, scholarship opportunities as well. But they're like $35 for maybe a 2 or 3 hour training. And they have done a series of screen reader trainings. It's 3 workshops, so like maybe 9 hours of how people use screen readers, and then how you develop for screen readers and testing with screen readers. So, an important part of the developer workflow is that you go back and use a screen reader to test. So anyways, I just wanted to highlight that. And if you want to go to nobility.org, you can contact them. It may not be listed on the site, but you can contact them and you can purchase these workshops after the fact, and they'll send you video recordings. Okay. So
on to WCAG.
Yay.
So the WCAG standards, as they're typically called, are the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. And they provide technical specifications to improve the accessibility of web content, websites, and web applications on desktop computers, laptops, tablets, and mobile devices. And they are taking into consideration people with a wide range of disabilities, including auditory, cognitive, neurological, physical, speech, and visual disabilities. And I just want to point out that these are not a law. They are a set of guidelines put together by W3C that are widely considered to be what the standard for accessibility should be on the web.
Yeah, and so, people say, or developers and teams dealing with accessibility, which version of WCAG do I need to use? And, WCAG 1.0, that was published in 1998, certainly then, follows in 2008, WCAG 2.0. WCAG 2.0, there are 38 different success criteria at these different levels, level A and level AA. And WCAG 2.0 currently is tied to Section 508 law that we talked about in the United States. But there is a more recent released version of WCAG, and this is WCAG 2.1. It was published in 2018. And it is backwards compatible, meaning that it includes everything from 2.0, but then adds in additional success criteria for levels A and AA. And this has already been adopted in the EU. So for example, the company I'm working for is an international company. They sell their product in Europe and they have to meet WCAG 2.1 standards. And it's probably just good to shoot for that WCAG 2.1 because it is backwards compatible. So if you are meeting WCAG 2.1, then you're going to meet all the requirements for Section 508. But then you'll also be prepped to sell your products in Europe.
Which is excellent. And they're also working on 2.2.
Yes. Okay, so we have these success criteria for how to meet accessibility. I did want to mention this, that WCAG is the bare minimum for accessibility. And that might get missed when we're forming all of our checklists and meeting compliance. But there's a lot more that can be done. And we categorize them in the development community as best practices to make them to make your products or your websites more accessible and more usable. So WCAG has these 4 primary areas where they organize these success criteria, and that is perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. And basically these principles organize the success criteria, and WCAG provides techniques on how to make this digital content more accessible. So, questions that are asked, can people perceive where they are on a page? And are they aware of the elements that exist on the page, right? Can they, in terms of operable, can they interact with these elements with a keyboard or not just a mouse? Understandable, is the application understandable? So do form inputs have labels? Do they have text associated with them? From a cognitive perspective, do you have simple, plain language, really clear, plain language, so that people can understand your content? And then in terms of robust, if the application is robust, can it be operated with assistive technology like screen readers and Zoom magnifiers? And actually, if you don't mind opening up the mind map, first of all, I just want to show you this reference because I personally am a visual learner. And so I find this to be an incredibly useful resource for understanding WCAG and all of the success criteria. So you can see WCAG 2.1, you can see the 4 principles, and you can see all of the different success criteria that fall under those principles. So please, by all means, print that out, paste it up on your wall, but it is a really clear way of understanding WCAG. And then if you go back and open up the quick reference, thank you. This is, especially for my, anyone working on a technology team, this is, just bookmark this, right? So this is a how to meet WCAG quick reference. And I just want to show you, There are filters here on the left hand of the screen that you can, decide what version you want to try and meet. You can choose your levels, level A, level AA, level AAA. You can decide what kind of techniques you're looking for, select technologies. But then over on the right-hand side, you can actually, if you will just open up a few of the, like show full description. There you go. So, you can read about these different criteria, success criteria. And I just find this a much easier way to kind of access the success criteria that we're trying to meet and understand, the various areas that it applies. WCAG can be a little overwhelming because if you go to the actual site, it can seem like a wall of text. And that's really not the best way to interact with it. Unless you're, a real strong reader, that's how you learn. You just want to read it from top to bottom. There are those people out there. That is not me. I like to interact with it in terms of, what do I need to know to build out, an accessible video player, for example. And that is where I will certainly come in here. I think another important aspect of this site is you can also check on areas of WCAG that apply if you're designing or if you're developing. So that's also important. Okay, take us back to thank you.
So now we will talk about the WebAIM Million, which is a massive undertaking from WebAIM. They have a tool called Wave, which is a tool that any of us can use. We'll have links on the next slide for Wave, but it will run an automated accessibility check on any website or web page that you're on so that you can see almost immediately some of the more basic things that might be wrong with your site that you can sort of pick off that low-hanging fruit before you get to some of the more complex, such as JavaScript applications. But they basically took 1 million website homepages and ran it through their Wave tool and came up with a list of the most common failures and, what different things that are sort of almost ubiquitous on websites that are preventing access for some folks. If you actually, Eric, if you click on the WebAIM Million link at the top there, this will take you to the resource and, all of their analysis and all of the conclusions that they came to that you can reference and see how that all played out. But it was kind of, it's kind of eye-opening to see just how many of that million websites actually had accessible pages, which was almost none of them.
Yeah, and so we realized after the fact that we should have perhaps recorded a demo of these different testing tools because Eric is running our slides. So I think perhaps, Alyssa, we can put this as workshop idea number 1.
Yes.
Do a workshop where we're demoing a lot of the different tools to test for or flag accessibility issues. But I will say, these are plugins that you just get from, these are mainly Chrome plugins that you can just get from the Chrome plugin store. And they are pretty intuitive to use to be able to flag and see accessibility issues in a website. So we will certainly explore that later. And then the next slide is accessibility by role. And I recognize that we have been talking for just over an hour, so we'll move us a little bit quickly. But if you don't mind opening up the first link, the user experience designers link. So it's important to understand that accessibility is a responsibility for everyone. It is not just a developer responsibility. It is a responsibility for designers. It is a responsibility for product managers or product owners. It's a responsibility for content designers. And the links in that slide provide you with the various ways that, so this is user experience, but the various ways a user experience designer might need to be thinking about accessibility in their work before they provide it to a developer. So I encourage you to look through these various tabs to kind of see the different ways that you can interact depending on your role. These two, okay, so if you don't mind opening up Designing for Accessibility link, I'm hoping that's what I was afraid of. Okay, so I will make sure and provide, I have some really fantastic posters that I will share with you that are about designing for accessibility. They are wonderful visuals for how to design for different disabilities, including like cognitive disabilities, blindness, deafness. So I will be sure to share with you the link that is accessible for you. Will you also click on personas for accessible UX? I just wanted to highlight this because this is also something my team is working on, is how do you incorporate accessibility in the design phase of product development? And so these are various personas that you can reference. If you open up Trevor, but you can see these personas that they're pretty in depth. If you don't mind scrolling down a little bit, you can see there's a lot of information here talking about Trevor, who has autism, and you know, some of the different ways that the struggles that he may face when using or playing with, I think in this case it is video games. And again, I really suggest reading through these different personas so that you can incorporate various disabilities into your persona creation. It's not that you isolate persona creation to, okay, and this is our person with a disability. No. It is more that you integrate people with disabilities into your personas that you then share with the team so that you can develop, keeping in mind all of these various, yes, abilities, aptitudes, and attitudes. Absolutely. All right, Alyssa, I'm going to let you speak to this one.
Yes. So how does a front-end developer contribute? Well, by shifting left, which includes testing early and often instead of waiting until the end to do the testing and then finding out you have a whole lot of bugs, and then you have to spend a whole lot of time debugging a large list of things instead of browser debugging while you're going along. You can use different plugins, like we mentioned before, the Wave tool, Microsoft Insights, and others. DeQ has one called Axe that's also very good. Those will do automated and semi-automated testing for you. So automated is just the computer runs the tests, and then semi-automated is it walks you through step by step and asks you to test certain things and then check off whether or not it worked. And then it helps guide you in making your fixes. Using assistive technology, so going through your site with a screen reader is often very helpful. Going through with just a keyboard instead of a mouse is very helpful. The tab order is very important for people using keyboards. So for instance, I was asked one time to retroactively make a mega menu, which is basically a tiered menu that just has, dozens of different options in it, how to make that accessible. And when I was trying to tab through that menu, it would only go to the top tier things, and then it would never dip down into the other tiers. And it skipped several. And I think one of the items was a keyboard trap, which basically just means that you can't tab out of it once you tab in. So that's a pretty big issue. So using screen readers and keyboards to go through is really, really helpful. And then just basically having your own basic accessibility checklist. You can compile them from lots of different sources. But again, the WCAG standards are going to be your best bet. That is pretty much a worldwide thing. So, good to start there for sure. So in the next slide, we're going to talk about accessibility overlays, which is a very controversial topic. So accessibility overlays are basically a software product that uses AI to assess the website and then offer options for people. So it gives them a menu. Say if the text is not big enough, it makes the text bigger, etc. Which in theory is an excellent idea. However, in practice, as you can see on the right, these are some of the issues that that people run into when people with disabilities are trying to use the overlays, whose intentions were to make the website more accessible, but a lot of times just makes it even less accessible than it was to begin with. There are several different companies that provide these overlays. AccessiBe is pretty much the main one right now, but UserWay is another, and there are several others out there as well. So I would say that this kind of goes hand in hand with, a large company wanting to show that they're doing something towards accessibility, but not wanting to put in the time or effort or money to, manually go in and actually fix what's wrong with their site. It puts the impetus for accessibility on the user instead of the company, which, one would argue is somewhat unethical. But there are several resources on this slide that you can reference later that goes through some of the reasons that these are not the best fix.
Yeah, and I would just thank you for that. And this is a huge step backward for the accessibility community, these accessibility overlays. Whenever I see them, I understand that a company wanted a cheap, quick fix and that they didn't actually care about the people using their product.
Right.
There's not a quick fix per se when trying to make a product accessible that has already been released without accessibility considered from the beginning. But it is worth the time and effort to put in the correct fixes so that people can actually access your product and interact with your product with dignity. So there's a lot to be said here. Obviously, I'm quite passionate about this topic, as is Alyssa. So just encourage your companies, if they are considering these, to just say no to accessibility.
Yes, I'm shaking my head, yes.
We should have like a big just say no or a big just say no to accessibility overlays. Okay, IAP certifications. So these, I really encourage you to, if you are interested in accessibility, if you are already technical or if you're not technical, it really doesn't matter. You can go through studying for these certifications and the IAPs, so their mission to define, promote, improve the accessibility profession globally through certification, education, and networking in order to enable the creation of accessible products, content, and services. And they have these two, they have more, but these two are specific to like if you want to be a certified professional accessibility kind of consultant, you might want to get these, the Certified Professional Accessibility Core Competencies. If you don't mind opening that up for me, Eric. This is a really fantastic certification for basically everyone on a team to strive to take. And I realized I spelled my own certification wrong, which is why I was struggling with the name, but there we go. Certified Professional in Accessibility Core Competencies. So for example, I encourage my design team to get this CPAC. It is not a technical certification so much as it is an awareness certification. If somebody has this CPAC certification, then you know that they have taken some time to learn about the various disabilities that are affect how people use a site or an application. It goes through some, how you incorporate it into the software development lifecycle, business perspectives, some high-level WCAG understanding. But it's a really great opportunity to showcase that you are interested and have an awareness of accessibility concerns in the digital space. The other certification, the Web Accessibility Specialist, or the WAS exam, is really more technical for web developers. And again, I personally am studying this myself. There's a lot to learn in terms of a very crystal clear understanding of WCAG and how it applies in the digital space, how to use all of these different assistive technologies, making sure that you're developing with their needs in mind. And you may see conversation about, is this required or not required? And I just don't really feel like it's a very helpful conversation. I think that if you have an interest and you want a quick way to show people that you are very interested in the accessibility space, then why not study and get these exams? Does it mean that you're going to be, a web accessibility specialist, that you're going to be perfect at everything? No, absolutely not. But it just, I think, demonstrates that very quickly to people that accessibility is your jam, if that's something that you would like to share out to the world. I think, just to recognize the counterpoint to this is that there are many, many people who are very, very deeply versed in accessibility who do not have these certifications. So these are, growing in popularity. My concern is for people who are entering into, are kind of in the early stages of your career with technology. And I think it's a very valuable thing to quickly demonstrate that you are, that you have a passion for accessibility. Yes. Alyssa, do you want to talk about the accessibility consultant?
Sure, yeah. So there are, as we covered before, design, developer, lots of different roles that can incorporate accessibility into their daily work. But then there are also tech careers that focus solely on accessibility. So the accessibility consultant would be one of those. You do have to have developer experience, but once you have that and you understand how to fix problems or audit sites, you can become an accessibility consultant specifically. So this is just one of many different accessibility focused careers that you might be interested in.
And then the next slide, we have some resources, people to follow, blogs to follow, podcasts, trainings. So certainly check them out.
And then on the next slide, next steps, if you're interested in continuing your journey with accessibility, there are lots of different organizations that can help. Always connecting with our group would be helpful if you want to have chats at any point. But also I'd like to mention that next week on Wednesday and Thursday, DeCue University is having a free translating design wireframes workshop that is accessibility focused, and that's for designers and developers or just anyone who's interested in learning more. We will post the registration link in the chat as well.
And actually, I also want to mention another thing that's happening next week, which is Access U. So the organization Nobility is running the John Slayton Access U conference. And if you have time or interest, I'm going to pop this into chat. I am attending next week. It's just I've attended the past few years. It's a really fantastic conference for developers and designers to learn more about accessibility space topics. And yes, Q&A.
Yeah, we should probably leave some time for Q&A for sure.
Yeah. Oh, the web is for everyone, and collectively we hold the power to change it. Another great Tim Berners-Lee quote. And that is my son, who said we went to a Black Lives Matter event here in Charlotte, and he wanted to wear his Flash costume and help people, or he said he wanted to run real fast and save all the people of the world. So put that in there. He is cute.
And you can connect with us on social media. I would say the best of these three would be the Slack channel. If you go to that URL right there, that'll take you to a registration. But there are lots of different channels inside of that workspace, including QC Bytes, but also many others for developers or just people interested in technology. So I would encourage you guys to join that Slack space. LinkedIn and Instagram, not as much going on there these days, just because we usually like to include the more live in-person things that we do, but definitely join up with those and look out for future posts.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, we should definitely open it up for Q&A now if anybody has questions. Maybe questions from the chat.
Yeah, sure. I can actually read over those unless Law, did you want to?
Hi. Yeah. Oh, wow. Okay. This could take a moment. Let's see. So we have some really good ones. We have one from Mr. Todd Peterson, and he wanted to know what is happening with IoT integration for web accessibility.
That is a great question.
Mm-hmm.
So I would point you to a great resource, Thomas Logan. He is located here in Charlotte. He runs a company. Actually, let me look it up really quickly for you. He does I don't know if he does IoT space, but he does a lot more, has a lot more conversations about things like virtual reality, augmented reality, and perhaps may have more good information about IoT, but that's a great question, because when you think about accessibility, it's certainly not just the web. And that is the concern, that as things grow out into all of these other spaces, like Internet of Things, that we are designing our products to be accessible for people who need different ways of interacting with those products. So that's a great question. I would recommend going him. I'm going to look him up right now so I can put that link in for you. Equal Entry. That is the name of his company.
Oh. Yay.
I'm sharing that. And then I don't, Todd, I don't know if you're on LinkedIn, but you can find, maybe connect with, let's see if I can find his profile. Because he posts, I find that he posts a lot of great information. He also runs the Ally meetup in New York City, which is always remote or virtual. So that's another resource I suggest for everyone on a variety of topics, but they may have some great things that are already on YouTube that you could search about Internet of Things.
Thank you, Louise. Yes. Now, okay, Mr. Todd had another one here. These are great ones. I mean, he gave us such a scroll. I really like this guy. So has anyone done anything with Box and Box regarding real-time sign language transcription?
Ooh.
Yeah.
Does that mean for web presentations or for, yeah, I mean, I guess it would be. I think that when we do presentations, we usually rely on the captions, but that's actually a really good idea. Louise, have you ever done anything with that?
I haven't. I have seen, some conversation just in, in different newsletters and whatnot that I'm getting about that. And I find it incredibly interesting. It would be really fantastic to be able to utilize that even more. But no, I haven't personally worked with it.
I'm intrigued by this myself. And let's see if we have, how much time do we have, ladies?
I mean, I can stay here and answer questions however long we need.
There's a question about API to link this adaptive controller to a desktop or laptop.
Okay, there are ways to do that. I'm not sure it's through an API, but I have a couple of links for those. Yeah, I can definitely send those along. Give me one second. I know that there are ways to connect them to PC, and then some creative ways to connect them to Macs, if that's what we're working with. So let me put those. Here we go. Those are some good resources for that question for sure. I haven't personally done it, but I know it can be done.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I know, especially for the both types of devices. We all need to learn either. And, I'm one of those with both. So thank you. And let's see. We have one from this wonderful Tynesha Brown. I hope I'm saying that correctly. And she says, would you recommend someone who is interactive designer web and graphic to take the university boot camp and the IAAP cert?
The DeQ University?
Take the boot camp?
I mean, I don't think it would hurt. I think definitely keeping it more on the theoretical side of things or the awareness side of things would be helpful. If the design is keeping development in mind too, then I would also recommend it.
And also DeQ has the DeQ University, if that's what we're talking about in terms of training. I do highly recommend that. I have recommended it for my designers because they have a whole collection of courses specific to designers. They also have a collection of courses specific for developers, training for their WAS exam. But I even I think they just released a course about live communication chat. So, I mean, they really have a lot of great trainings. Affordable. They offer scholarships for those who have disabilities, I believe. So.
Also, as we mentioned before, too, next week there are there's a two-day session from DeQ that's for translating wireframes into accessible products, and so I know that I reached out to them, and that if you can't, it's during the day, so I know a lot of people are working, so if you can't make it to that, you can still register, and they will be sending out video resources after the fact to anybody who has registered. So even if you can't make it, go ahead and register so that you can get those videos afterwards.
Yeah, and I also recommend going to DeQ's website and signing up for their newsletter, because then they'll send you, they do a lot of really great free workshops. And they'll email you about those, that are upcoming.
Yeah, the next week one is free also, I should mention.
Yes, we like free at the library.
Free.
Yeah, that is a great four-letter word. Mr. Todd, once again, wants to invite QC Bytes to join the meetings at CDIA, which is kind of cool.
And what is CDIA exactly? Let me look it up. I looked up CDIA and I'm seeing Consumer Data Industry Association. I feel like that's probably not correct. So love a little more information. Yeah, Todd, if you want to reach out to us and give us some more information about that, that would be great.
Yep. Love that. Also, I did not want to forget.
I didn't.
I know you weren't going to forget. You would remind me. A couple of books that I highly suggest. This is one I'm currently reading. It is called A Web for Everyone. It is by Sarah Horton and Whitney Kiesenberry. Designing Accessible User Experiences. So for my user experience, I'm terrible with. Okay. So I highly recommend this book, A Web for Everyone. And then also, there is another book, Inclusive Design for Digital World, Designing with Accessibility in Mind by Regine Gilbert. And these are two. Hey, and Thomas Logan has a review on the back. I love when I make connections among the accessibility community. So
I'm seeing that CDIA is the Charlotte Digital Inclusion Association. That sounds fascinating. Yes, I think we should definitely link up. Yeah, definitely. Let's do that.
Inclusion. Absolutely.
Yeah, that sounds perfect.
Thank you.
Now, also, Tanisha mentioned, can you send her the link? Is that for the DeCue University boot camp is what you needed, Tanisha?
I can do that right now.
I'm going to make sure we didn't miss her request.
The boot camp or the thing for next week? Because that one is right here.
All of the above. Just do it all.
Yeah, a couple of members of my team are going to take that wireframing workshop.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was planning on taking it, but now I have jury duty. So
that's
I'm
always
not really sure how to respond to that one.
Yeah, I'll watch the videos that they send.
Yes, thank good for that, right?
I think that's great that they send out the resources afterwards so that you can watch them. Or I know that for people on my team, you know, my boss wanted the designers and developers to all sit in on it, but losing all of those people for 2 days a week. So we're going to watch the resources together afterwards, which is great.
That's nice.
All right, guys, it's just a little after 12:30. So I want to thank our panelists. Thank you so much for being here today. A lot of great presentation. Absolutely fabulous. We are going to drop in a survey for everyone at home who's watching. If you would not mind taking that, this will just help us kind of assess where we can go with CodeLab next. And then I'm also going to share some job help resources. The library offers job help through the downtown, and we've been doing a lot of virtual stuff in this COVID-19 time. Let's see if I can drop that in there. And these includes virtual programs, resume writing, one-on-one career development, weekly job seeker support groups, and those are usually on Monday. If you want more CodeLab programming, we have that through our website. You can go to the events page. It's on the main page. You'll see a little square. I'm also going to share a link to that. We only have one other one coming up right now. It is June 19th, and it is Intro to the Web Development. And you can also check out the QC Bytes meetup. We also post our CodeLab stuff with them. And right now it only has not updated with that June 19th date yet, but it will soon.
Mm-hmm. Well, I hope we were able to answer all your posted questions. And
And
thanks,
if you think of
Ashley, for
anything-
posting everything.
Yeah.
Trying to
and,
keep up.
and if anybody has questions after the fact, just reach out to us. We're here.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.